My earliest childhood memories are like finishing my homework as quick as I could, turning the paper over and drawing cities. I had this epiphany moment. I was like, oh my God, I've done this before. If we could harness AI correctly in healthcare, like how many more people would have more joy in their jobs? Like how many people would like go home earlier and have dinners with their family?
Have you ever been inside a hospital and wondered, why is it so hard to get from one place to another? The signs don't make sense. The trauma bay is a 5-minute walk to the operating room. You're navigating unlabeled doors and mystery hallways just to find the cafeteria. It turns out the way we design healthcare spaces and healthcare systems doesn't always keep up with the people working inside them. Ibrahim has spent his whole career at that intersection. He's a surgeon who studied architecture in London, became chief medical officer of one of the world's largest architecture firms during his career as a physician, and along the way, created the visual abstract, something that has now changed how the entire field of medicine shares research. Now, he's chief clinical officer at Viz.ai, where he's bringing that same design instinct to AI, helping to build tools that help doctors spend less time fighting their systems and more time taking care of patients. So, Andrew, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. I'm so excited to talk about your journey and all the things you've done.
Thanks, man. I'm excited to talk to you. So looking forward to it for a long time.
Everyone has a different place where their story or stories start. I would love you to tell me the story of what Andrew was like as a fifth grader when you were drawing illustrations in the back of your homework, drawing city plans. Because when I was a fifth grader, we were drawing airplanes and cars, and I didn't know anyone who was sketching out city planning at that age.
Yeah, I'm not sure why I gravitated towards it, but you're exactly right. My earliest childhood memories are like finishing my homework as quick as I could, turning the paper over and drawing cities, and just had this like intuitive fascination with like, how many houses do you need? If you have that many houses, like how big should the school be? And like, how far away should the hospital be? And do people like want to walk by a police station to get to the park? Or like, and just figuring out all these adjacencies. I think what it was like the early signs is like a health services researcher, maybe, of like, you're trying to figure out like, where do all the pieces go to make stuff work? And I think more maybe philosophically, there are so many people who are so talented, who are like working their butts off in like whatever field, every discipline. And if they're not in the right location, it doesn't like translate. Like it just doesn't work. And you just see all this like amazing potential that never gets realized. And so I'm starting to think like that's the itch I've been trying to scratch as like a little kid. I'm like, I just want the city to be cool. Like, I just, like, if we're going to spend all this money to build all this stuff, like, I want it to work. Like, I want people to be happy. And it turns out that's sort of been the thread in every one of these journeys that I've been on is like, just want the thing to work. Like, people are working hard. We're putting a ton of resources into it. Like, why aren't we getting the thing on the other side? And trying to figure out how to tweak that equation to make it work has been like an obsession.
I love that high level thread line because I have a feeling that's going to show up a lot in our conversation today. Andrew, did you always know you wanted to be a doctor?
It's torn between being a doctor and an architect. And my parents, in their like lovely wisdom, neither of them are in medicine, but they said, we don't know any like architects of like how to like mentor you, to like help you to like figure out what you're supposed to do to get into architecture school. And my older brother was a doctor. And so like, what would you do if you couldn't be an architect? I was like, I'd probably be a doctor. Like I love my older brother and that's like the next closest thing. So they were like, why don't you get into med school and then like do whatever you want? So I got into med school. I was like super young and I went to go like, summer OChem, all the stuff to just like get in as fast as you can.
You were 20, by the way. That's like below the legal drinking age, if I'm correct.
Yeah, I know, right? And I owe a ton of credit to the dean at the time, Dean Mehta. And I was like, I just don't know if I'm like ready to start med school. Like I was so jazzed to get in that I went and like shadowed for a day. It was like so intimidating. I'm like, man, we're like cutting dead people open. Like this is bonkers. Like I just felt like I hadn't had enough lived experience. So she's like, what would you do if you weren't a doctor? I was like, I'd probably be an architect. She's like, you answered that kind of quickly. And she's like, well, why don't you go study architecture and you can come back. We'll save your seat here. So I went to the Bartlett in London, did like a bunch of coursework around a bunch of stuff. And it was like so much harder. because if you're like a 20-year-old kid, you're given like a blank slate and it's like, create something that's never existed before.
Mm.
It's pretty challenging. So I think that's sad. Maybe wasn't like a great architecture student, but I came back to med school and I was like, what do we do? And they're like, well, you read these 5 books. On Friday, there's a test. Everything on the test is in the 5 books. I'm like, you're kidding. I'm like, what do we do next week? And they're like, same thing, but it's like a new 5 books. In my head, I'm like, this is so much more straightforward. Like, this is great. And then, like fast forward, as you know, like a year or two in medicine, you start getting these incredible lived experiences. And by the time I was halfway through residency and doing like my research time as a surgery resident, you are full of so many stories and experience. Where now, if someone gives you like a blank slate in a studio, you're like, yeah, I can create all kinds of stuff. I have all kinds of
Mhm.
ideas that need to happen to make things work better. So I ended up like revisiting architecture during my 2 years of research as a surgical resident. And I just went to this architecture firms and I said, like, who in your team helps you design hospitals, who like works in the hospital, who like knows the flow of patients, who knows all these care delivery pathways? Like, we don't have anyone like that. I was like, don't you think that'd be valuable? And he said, yeah. I was like, how valuable exactly? So I was trying to figure out like an hourly consulting rate. So I ended up doing that initially and then became chief medical officer of an architecture firm. And it was so fun because I was like, I had such a unique contribution in that space, but I also had like all these pent up experiences of things that didn't go right. And this was finally now an outlet to be like, oh, we can literally design the space differently. We can like literally fix the care pathway and use the stuff to our advantage. So I was like, this works. This is great.
I'm so grateful that you consolidated that massive journey that you've been on, and I want to come back and catch up to that, and also talk more about what you're doing at Viz.ai now. But I'm really curious if we go back to the still 20-something Andrew re-entering medical school with this fresh training under your belt in architecture. How did that change the experience of medicine? Besides being relieved that it was a straightforward test with a book that you read every week and that perspective.
Yeah. I mean, I think every situation was like very loaded, right? Because you're never like walking into a patient room. You're thinking about like the lighting. You're like noticing how big the rooms are. You're noticing like, why was it so hard to get here? I'd argue you go to like any hospital in the country, the way finding to get from one place to another is like awful. And it's just funny because, we as doctors are so used to that in the medical record. We click in like 30 different places, like probably with our eyes closed, and we're just so used to these workarounds. And I think we like very quickly take for granted that we do the same thing in the hospital. We walk through this random double door that's unlabeled, which somehow opens up to this other hallway. Then you get to the cafeteria. And like, how does that like make any sense in normal? So I found myself like pretty distracted actually by the wayfinding, the adjacencies. Like, why wouldn't the trauma bay be right next to the trauma OR? Like, those things should almost be side by side. And in some hospitals, it's like a 15-minute walk. Like, that doesn't make any sense either. And so then you start going down some rabbit holes of trying to like deconstruct, like, what happened here? Who missed the ball? Or no one missed the ball, but there were these 10 other constraints that led to why that was built that way, whether it's fire code, building code, where the land was available, and you're like, oh, guess like they didn't really have a choice. It's kind of what they had to do. I would say if you ask me biochemical pathways as a first year med student, I don't think I was very stellar. But if you started asking me like things you want to redesign in the hospital, I probably had a pretty big list growing by then already.
That's so interesting how you put that about wayfinding. I mean, I had a number of experiences, as did, my co-residents where I trained, of being in an elevator, squeezing someone's heart in my hand because we opened their chest in the trauma bay and got a pulse back and needed to get up to the OR, which is an elevator right away. Yeah. And even what you said about med school, I mean, being a medical student is often being the one person on the service who knows all the shortcuts to get from one floor to the next and kind of guiding the teams around. That's so interesting. And it sounds like that became kind of an itch for you early on.
I think what like triggered me is like, we all know these classmates in med school, and like undergrad too, who are like the smartest, hardest working people. Like undergrad's a good example, but they can't do OChem to save their life. And you're just sitting there being like, they would be a great doctor. And it is such a shame that like they can't get in the door because of like something that I think's not as important. And you're sitting there thinking like, our field is missing out on so much good potential because of the process we've created. And so I started thinking about that, like as a med student too. It's like, man, there's so many great classmates who like are struggling because the system, not that we have to redesign the whole system, but there's just some things that are legacy or arbitrary that all right, don't need to be there anymore that are holding some people back. So it became a little bit of an obsession to figure out like, all right, how do you like clear the roadblocks so that like people can shine? My collective belief is that like if healthcare is going to get better, we need everybody at like 110%. Like we need everybody with their like discretionary energy, their unique talents at their highest performance to get this thing to work. How do you create the environment that gets people at that top performance? If we're not actively thinking about how to create that, it's very hard to stay optimistic about healthcare.
Andrew, I know the pathway into surgery wasn't super easy and straightforward. Can you tell me a little bit about that chapter?
I was chair of the family medicine interest group in med school. I like the idea of breadth and wanting to know a little bit about everything. I think because I was just so curious about different places of the hospital, I'm like, I kind of want to know about everything. So I thought family medicine had the right breadth. And I liked inpatient more than outpatient. So I was like, what's the inpatient version? So I thought I was a hospitalist. And I said, what's like the inpatient version where I can call like less consults? And I ended up finding general surgeons who like in a single day, you were like in the ICU, you were in the trauma bay, you were in the children's hospital, you were then in the cancer clinic, and then you were in the OR. And I was like, you mean you're comfortable in all those spaces every day? And I don't know why that just like resonated. I think in my mind, it was starting to be clear, like what an incredible platform for me to get to do all the things that I've gotten to do since that I saw being a generalist as super valuable. It's like jack of all trades is a master of none, but it's still better than a master of one. It's like the second half of that. I kind of hang my head on a little bit.
That's beautiful. I'd love to fast forward a little bit in your career. And I'll just say from the outside observer, kind of watching the movie of Andrew, it seems like you keep entering into these deeper and deeper rings where you meld the two architecture and medicine parts of yourself more and more. And it seems like it becomes more and more rewarding every time. Just kind of flagging that is what I've noticed. And I would love you to share what the visual abstract was, because anyone who's in medicine knows this as like a common household name, but it was something that you created. And I'd love to understand the story behind that and why you think that took off so much.
The origins of visual abstract probably tap into a similar nerve of like, there's a lot of great research out there that people would love to read if they just knew what the paper is about. Like there's all these papers that have so much potential to impact their field, but we can't get them in front of the right readers because they're stuck behind 3,000 words of text. It's like if you had to read hundreds of words just to know what a paper was about, what are the odds you're going to go read that paper? And so the origin is like a good lesson in like leadership. When I was in my first year of research, my boss, my research mentor at the time was a guy named Justin Dimmick, who's an assistant professor, but he's also the associate editor at Annals of Surgery. He asked me like what I knew about Twitter. I was like, oh yeah, I'm on Twitter. And he asked if I could help with disseminating research articles for the Annals of Surgery on Twitter. So basically just gave me like the Twitter account. I just thought like, I think it had like 10,000 followers at the time. And I was like, this is like so easy. I just got to post the articles on here. Everyone's going to read them. And there was a particular article that I knew well. So I'd done architecture work in London. And there was an article about London establishing a coordinated trauma system and how like mortality improved, triage improved. And I'm sitting there thinking like, this is a big deal. Like I lived there, like I like understand how big of a deal that was. I thought about all the weird adjacencies in a city like London. And I was like, Justin, this is a big deal. Like, we got to disseminate this thing. He's like, you're literally the person in charge. And so I realized that like nobody, if I post the abstract text, like that's not going to like capture anyone's attention. So I started like focus groups where I made a slide deck of that paper summarized in like 10 different little infographics. And I like remember saying one of the sessions, I'm like, the goal is to basically be like the visual summary of the abstract that you can capture in just a few seconds. And someone just blurted out like, so like a visual abstract. I was like, yeah, exactly. Like a visual abstract. So I can't take credit for making the name. It came out of like a focus group. The first visual abstract we made, it got seen 35,000 times in the first week compared to just like a few hundred as the text. And so it was like clear, like, oh my God, this is like a thing. And I give a lot of credit to Justin Dimmick, my mentor, because, he's like a giant of American surgery, president of the American Association of Academic Surgery. He's now the editor-in-chief of the Annals of Surgery, chair of like a big academic department. I mean, this is a guy who like, he can rubber stamp certify stuff. And when I made the visual abstract, there are some people who were like, oh, you do like the cartoon thing. And Justin reframed it to, no, you elegantly simplify an important research article to its key points that engages audience to get them to read the work. That is a much more sophisticated skill than just creating some pictures. And his validation was super important because we ended up launching like a prospective randomized trial of visual abstracts versus text and found that articles get read almost 3 times as much. And then every journal editor was calling me saying, can you teach our journal how to do this? And what are your frameworks? What are your guidelines? What are your templates? So I owe a ton of credit to Justin, in the same way I think about how to design a city and put things in the right place. He, as a leader, takes that responsibility with people. Like, how do I put people on my team in the right place so that they flourish? And he's like, Andrew should be involved in something with design. Like, he clearly flourishes. We need that in our surgery ecosystem. Let me find opportunities for him to do it. So I realized him asking me to do this job in Annals of Surgery. And my initial reaction was like, he has this annoying task on his plate. He's just trying to get off and like give it to his mentee. But in reality, he was actually like career crafting. And he was like, I think I can harness Andrew's talents and put it in a format where it can really be showcased and highlighted.
So many incredible lessons about leadership and mentorship there. And I love how he kind of reframed it for you in the beginning, saying, no, this isn't a cute little thing you're doing. This is bringing real value to the world.
Which I think is hard. Hard in the design world, right? Like you're in a field like surgery, we're pretty like 1-0 cut and dry. It means a lot when a giant of the field elevates design to a level where it's like, hey, this is really important to our work. This actually adds value to our field. So I have a ton of gratitude to him for creating that space.
At what point did you start to think that it would be interesting to work with an architecture firm wearing the hat of a doctor?
I don't know if interesting was the right hook, but like frustration.
Out of frustration.
Yeah, because my intern year, it was in Cleveland. I was like a prelim intern, but I was at like 5 different hospitals. So now you're like, if you went to like one hospital and you thought the design was kind of not awesome, you could think like, maybe it's just my hospital. I don't know any better. Then you start going to like every hospital and you realize like it's everyone. Like
Wait a minute.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And there's like historical reasons behind why that's the case, but it just gets like under your skin and you're like, I need to intervene. And so I felt a sense of frustration and urgency once you realize like, gosh, I like know a little bit about what's going on here. And then you realize some of your other colleagues who are equally frustrated don't have that other piece of knowledge. You start feeling like an ownership or responsibility. Like, hey, I need to step in. Like, I need to find myself wearing both hats because there's not many people who can do that. And there's like clearly a need. And I think most people who work in a hospital or have been a patient in a hospital would universally agree, like, we probably could design better. And so as I was saying, like, okay, there's a huge need. I've now, by chance, developed these skills in different places that are actually converging pretty well. So it was mostly driven out of frustration and seeing a need as opposed to it just being interesting.
What was the reaction when you started to bring these conversations to different firms?
Some were like interested, but they were like, we don't like do that. And others were like, well, what does a chief medical officer do in an architecture firm? I was pretty ambitious. I had my talking point slide was called Health in All Design, where I said, I think everything we design and build should be done is with health as a priority, kind of similar to like health in all policies that was predecessor. So there should be a design equivalent. And I said, stadiums, airports, all that stuff should be designed with health as a priority. So I remember like in 2019, I got to go give a talk at the Royal College of Physicians in London on health and all design. And I give this talk and I said, even stadiums should be designed with like health as a priority. Fast forward a year later, we're now in COVID. We are thinking about, if we don't have enough beds, where are we going to make field hospitals?
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, stadiums come to the top of your list because you're like, where do I have parking? Where can I fit thousands of people? Where do I have infrastructure to move a lot of people through? And then later, when we had vaccines available, how do you get thousands of people to move through a space for something like vaccinations for COVID? Like stadiums become like the infrastructure. And then like now when I give that talk, people are like, of course we should be designing our huge public health multi-billion-dollar investments with health as at least a consideration. So it's great. It's kind of become like a little more normative in these larger scale operations. But it's like maybe one silver lining of COVID that it elevated that into main discourse.
I'd love to pause this part of the story and kind of fast forward a little bit. Maybe you could share with me what it was that made you transition from your role as chief medical officer at an architect firm to chief clinical officer at Viz.ai. And then maybe we could unpack exactly what Viz is doing. But tell me about that shift and how you decided to make that.
Yeah, in the architecture firm, I still loved working in an architecture firm. There were the people, and I think for a lot of us in medicine will appreciate this, the people who like mentor you and recruit you into a space when they like retire or move on, you're kind of like, oh, like what do I do? Not that person's like not here anymore. So the handful of people who recruited me into HOK and I worked like super closely with, they like retired. And I was like, they're like, you can still call us, but I'm like, I don't know. I don't want to work with the new guy. I don't know who it is. And actually, I got to know the new people who took over and they're like awesome and excellent. But I was just kind of like, if they're retiring, I think I'm going to hang my hat up too. I remember just kind of thinking, all right, now what do I do? And I'd immersed pretty deeply in my academic life, became a tenured endowed professor, had a lot of grants, running a big center, and just having dinner with my wife. And I was like, I can't like put my finger on it, but I just don't feel like the input of energy and effort that we're all doing is getting the output we need on the other side. And I was just trying to think, I was like, in the next 5 years, if Andrew writes 100 more papers, like, does that make the world better? Like maybe I might write a couple, 2 or 3 good ones that really can feel, but just to know. And so I'm like picking my head up, I'm looking around. I'd been asked about a year ago to look at serving in some like federal agency roles, which all of a sudden like changed the scale of your thinking. And one of the things I was asked to do is to think about like, what should the regulatory environment look like for AI in healthcare? I'm just like kind of like thinking about the question like deeply. I ended up like not stepping into that role, but I spent like so much time immersing in it. And I started having these light bulbs go off. I was like, is like AI the platform that like frees up a lot of these frustrations? Wouldn't it be great if instead of taking doctors who've trained for 20 years when they just want to order some Tylenol. Wouldn't it be great if they didn't have to click like 50 times, log into 3 different places, and do like these acrobatics on a screen? Wouldn't it be great to just let that person like say that's what they want, or like push a button on their phone and it could just like happen? And it sounded like sci-fi when I started to think through it. And now I think all of us would appreciate with like the advances of AI, that's like very like reasonable. So I started to see AI as like this massive enabler to maybe come full circle on like the initial conversation. How many people do we know in healthcare who like maybe want to quit their job, do something else, not because they're not smart, not because they're not talented, not because they aren't working hard, but the amount of effort they're putting in is not translating on the other side to the output. Like it just gets bogged down at like every level, another form to fill out, another thing to call, and. And so I was like, gosh, if we could harness AI correctly in healthcare, what would that do for like the human potential in our field? Like how many less people would quit? Like how many more people would like have more joy in their jobs? Like how many people would like go home earlier and have like dinners with their family? Like as I like started to get that bug, I was like, oh my God, I need to like do this. So I got introduced to a bunch of people and ultimately ended up meeting the team at Viz.ai who said, we have this platform. We want to disseminate it bigger. I don't know why. Maybe something in the story they were telling involved putting pieces in the right place. And I was just kind of like, yeah, that's what I want to do. So I've been there about 6 months now.
I want to come back to the visual idea of putting pieces in their places, but maybe you could give our audience a sense of what Viz.ai does, what the experience is for a patient who has a scan. Once the data and the pixels from we'll say their CAT scan hits the system, what does that look like in a machine that has Viz.ai at the center of its heartbeat?
I think for all of us in healthcare, we all know there's like a standard of care we're always striving for. And there's so many things that are fighting against that to happen. So a patient who shows up at a hospital with stroke symptoms is a great example. If you walk that through the natural history of what would typically happen, patient has symptoms, they get a CT scan, gets sent to the radiologist. Radiologist reads it. By the time they read it, they flag this important finding of a stroke. They now call the emergency department. Emergency department then consults their local neurologist. Local neurologist then says, oh my gosh, this person needs like an intervention, like a thrombectomy. So now they have to call another hospital who may or may not have beds. That person says, well, I don't know if I can do it unless I can see the imaging. You're figuring out how to curry imaging over all of a sudden. And then you're like, okay, fine, we'll accept that patient. And then you're figuring out transportation. And now like an hour or two has gone by in a clinical condition where like minutes matter. And so what Viz.ai founders David and Chris Mancy did, starting at Stanford almost a decade ago, is they built the computer vision AI model to automate the detection of the stroke on CT. And we're smart enough to know that image, once it's detected as a possible stroke, needs to go to the final decision maker at the end of that tree. So it immediately goes to the IR neurosurgeon on call who could read the image on their phone, subsequently can right from the phone chat with their team and initiate the transfer. So it's been almost like standard of care now to have some AI triage pathway for stroke. We're in 2,000 hospitals. Time from like door to patient ultimately getting treatment, been almost 100 papers on it, and getting our time to treatment down almost an hour for many patients.
Wow.
Likely to need ICU care, shorter length of stay, less likely to need post-acute rehab. It almost becomes this like no-brainer of like, oh my God, of course we should be doing that. It's like such a brilliant use case of harnessing AI to get like the outcome you want and not have to get stuck in 5 or 6 phone calls, figuring out what's going to happen where. It's like, we know the right thing to do. And we've created like a shortcut to get you there quickly and to be able to do it like repeatedly every time. So it's been super great. And then when you think about that example and pause for a minute, it's like, gosh, what if like every clinical pathway in the hospital could run that smoothly? Like every new cancer patient who comes to clinic gets the right workup, the right imaging, the right genetic testing, gets the right diagnosis, gets the right treatment, gets the right surveillance subsequently, and all of a sudden you're like, you start walking it through, you're like, there are tons of places where we know exactly what to do. And we know that there are these forces working against the right thing to do all the time. If AI can just straighten that path out and make it happen a lot quicker, it'd make all of our lives a lot better.
It's a really beautiful way to think about it. Andrew, you have the mind of an architect, we'll say the soul of a designer. Uh, How does this filter through to the way you are thinking about AI right now? Like we look at hallway lengths, you're talking about light bulbs and distances from rooms to rooms, talking about journal graphics. What does that look like for you when you bring that sensibility to Viz.ai?
My like hope for AI is we're simplicity on the other side of complexity. No one goes to Google's website and says like, what do I do here? You know exactly what to do, as you know from all the user design training and stuff. And so we are in this era where like, gosh, even the best of us doctors, when we know what to do, we're still presented with like a million things in front of us that are pulling us away from that. I was like explaining to somebody that before my clinic on Tuesdays, I chart review for like 1 or 2 hours. I have to log into 3 places. I'm literally looking for the same 5 data points for every single one of these patients. And I just, I literally type them to myself in an email, patient name, appointment number, like these 5 data points. And then I email it to myself so I can like get through clinic on time. And it's like, gosh, like what a great use case of AI to just like do that for me and save me an hour or two the night before that I can just spend with my family. So I just think we're so used to these workarounds in healthcare that we've like almost taken for granted, like how much work we're doing to collect all this stuff from all these different places. And so my vision at Viz is like almost like the ultimate chief resident. Like you have this assistant with you all the time who's preparing the imaging for you, who's flagging things that are important. If workup is missing, they're ordering it before the patient shows up to clinic. They write the note for you, and then you're just like proofreading and signing. Like all of us in medicine will like relate to like when you have that great chief resident on service, you're just like, God, my life is so good right now. And I was like, that should be the case all the time. We have the technology to do it, and it's just scaling it to the pathways and getting it integrated into health systems.
It's I do you one better and say it sounds like the ultimate chief resident with like the hustle of the ultimate surgical intern who's running around, flying around, making all the things happen while the chief resident looks good and kind of
Yeah, yeah,
buffs it
yeah.
up
You
for
have
the
like the whole
attending.
ecosystem, right?
Yeah.
Like the whole ecosystem combined into one who's just always on your behalf. I mean, I lose a lot of sleep thinking about because of my story, right? I'm someone who like failed their boards in med school, didn't match into residency, then took like an a-traditional career path and was very successful, and then tenured professor, NIH funding, all the stuff, and then kind of detours to this like AI career. Because of that path, I get a lot of phone calls from people who are like at a fork in the road. The number of phone calls I get from people right now who are like, I don't know if I can do one more clinic, man. I don't know if I can like do one more week of rounds. Like it's pretty alarming, like how many people are discontent. So I feel like this massive urgency. Like I feel like I end the phone call with like, hang on like a couple more months, man. We're cranking this stuff out like as fast as we can to try to make the ecosystem better. But it is frustrating to think about the amount of people we've trained for like 2 decades. And then like a couple of years in, they like hate their jobs. So we have to do better. Like we have to get the pieces in place to make it easier for people to do their jobs and not get stuck in all these unnecessary bottlenecks.
You joined Viz.ai, and if I have my dates correct, you were testifying before Congress within like a couple days of your first day at work. Is that
About 2 weeks, yeah.
wow? What was that like? What was the experience like? How did that feel?
It was pretty incredible. So I joined Viz, and Viz was asked to testify in front of Congress in the context of Congress wants to understand how to responsibly scale AI in healthcare. And they said Viz was one of the first FDA approvals for AI imaging, first EKG de novo approval for identifying conditions, first CMS NTAP payment approval. So like, okay, you guys are kind of like one of the OGs, like, how to do this. You've been around a long time. Give us like a roadmap for how to do this. And so, I had my questions, preparing, rehearsing for them. But I don't know that many people who've like testified in front of Congress. So I called someone named Scott Gottlieb, former FDA commissioner. He was someone who was giving me advice when I thought about taking a federal role. And he goes, Andrew, there's 3 rules to testify in front of Congress. He's like, number 1, don't make any headlines. He's like, if there's something cute you want to say, don't say it the cute way. Just say it the boring, simplest way. He goes, second, don't take the bait. Everyone's going to give you bait. Don't take it. Just answer in the shortest way possible. Stick to what you want to say. And third, he said, always say thank you. He said, every single time you're going to say thank you. He said, first time you don't say it, they're just going to be on you. So I show up to Congress. I literally have like my speech written out. And then I have like below it, like Scott's like 3 little talking points. And so I'm sitting there saying, thank you so much for the question. It's really great. I'm not going to like go down this rabbit hole you want me to go down. I'm just going to say to what I say. And thank you so much. That's like a great question. And as I got like 3 or 4 questions in, I had this epiphany moment. I was like, oh my God, I've done this before. This is just like doing a revise and resubmit of a manuscript and like responding to reviewer 2. Thank you so much for that interesting question. We're really not going to change our paper that much, but we clarified a couple things. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And as I got through it, I was like, man, those 200 papers and all those R&Rs have like bred me for this moment. And like Congress is reviewer 2. And it it made me laugh. My wife likes to say all labor is profit. She's like, everything you're doing somehow helps you at some later point, even when it's not obvious. And she's like, did you ever think that at one point in your life, you're going to be testifying in front of Congress? And the reason you're prepared for that moment is because of you've had practice responding to reviewer 2 on revise and resubmit manuscripts. And I was like, I never would have anticipated that like benefit. It's cool. It's a cool way to think that like all these things we do that we maybe find nagging and annoying, maybe preparing us for something super important in the future.
I love that. And for our audience who may be less familiar with academic publishing, reviewer 2 is that mythical reviewer that will always find something wrong. It's often irrelevant or not really on the spot, and they're often not really an expert in that subject matter, and somehow they always have feedback that they're unhappy with. You and I have a mutual friend. He said to me once, the wobbly path is the best path. And I think about this all the time, and I think that you are someone who really exemplifies taking an indirect path, taking a couple paths that you've woven together. And you even referred in this call to the number of people that kind of are reaching out at times of crossroads and times of crisis. I'm so curious, what do you tell a medical student, a resident, someone who feels pulled towards something that's not the traditional path? What is your advice for that person?
Yeah, I love it. I get the question a lot, especially with like medical students and junior people. I tell them a paradox that Justin Dimick taught to me. The more creative you want to be in your career early on, the more you need to like ace the basic stuff. For example, let's say you're a med student and in that 3rd year, you want to do this elective that's never been approved before. It's offsite. The med school has to chip in some money. But it's really important to you. You want to do it. If up until that point, you've been like poor attendance, you barely passed any of the exams, you've had to remediate a couple of the things that are like the core fundamentals, it's hard to get like your leadership excited to give you this big exception. But gosh, if you're like in class all the time when you're supposed to, you learn the stuff you're supposed to, you master the basics, you get to that point and they say like, oh my gosh, you're doing amazing. Oh, we'd love for you to do this new thing. Of course, we'd love to support you. So there is a little bit of a paradox that the more creative you want to be, you actually have to first hone your core basics first and like shore up those things. And I think the same thing is true when you get to like faculty life. So like this is certainly true for us, like in surgery, our field It's high stakes. You're making life and death decisions pretty frequently in the OR. Things can go wrong. And there is like a learning curve of your confidence to like settle in being a surgeon. So my first year on faculty as a surgeon, I took extra call at the community hospital. I think I wrote like one paper that whole year. And I was just like double scrubbing with other attendings. I had days where I'd go watch other attendings operate and not scrub in and just had my notebook in the corner because it was so important to just get on the flat of the learning curve as like a technical surgeon.
Yeah.
Because in my first year, like I remember my first few months operating, if I had an OR day, I used to be on Thursdays, I'd probably spend half a Tuesday and a lot of Wednesday just thinking about my cases. Like, what am I going to do if this happens? Now I can go to my OR day and I feel very confident. Like I know what to do. I know how to handle tough situations. So then like the day after your OR day, instead of just being exhausted, you're like, cool, I have like energy and headspace to try this new creative thing. So I guess my paradoxical advice at every stage level is the more creative you want to be, the first step is to shore up your fundamentals because that gives you the longer leash and frees up your headspace to be able to do the more creative work.
Great advice. Andrew, you've said that you are, if I can get this right, obsessed with unrealized potential,
Yep.
and I'm so curious. You've shared a glimpse of how healthcare could be better, and some of the real shortcomings that Viz.ai is sort of racing against burnout almost to fix for providers. Where else do you see some of the biggest areas of untapped opportunity in healthcare?
I'll tell you two. One, I'll give you another clinical example of just guideline concordant care. Like if we look at like cancer patients, I mean, it is still alarming that we are somewhere at 30-40% guideline concordant care. I thought it was maybe just like recording errors. One of my colleagues at Michigan, Callie Harbaugh, she's an awesome colorectal surgeon. She started going through claims data of like who gets full staging imaging before they get like a cancer resection. And it's still like not great. Like it's less than half. And you're
Oh
like,
my gosh.
possible in like 2020, this data is like maybe 2024, but in our modern era, we still have people undergoing like cancer surgery and having gotten like the appropriate staging and workup before doing that.
And for our audience, that means potentially having a big cancer surgery without knowing whether the tumor had spread to other parts of the body.
But when you get like into the clinical workflows, you could maybe appreciate why those things don't happen. But guideline concordant care, gosh, we have so many things that we know what to do. It's just so hard to do it, so it doesn't get done. Or the guidelines are changing so often, it's hard to keep pace. And so just getting the care simplified is one, making it easy to do the right thing, whether it's transferring the patient, keeping care local, all that stuff. Other is slightly more philosophical in that I think we need everybody in healthcare to just like genuinely think about what are your like discretionary talents and interests and how do you bring those to work? Okay, you like to design images. Figure out a way to like bring that to your job and your work. Maybe it's visual abstracts or whatever. Okay, you love like music and poetry. I don't know. Figure out a way to bring that to work. You love like nerdy coding in Claude. I love it. Bring that like to your job, you know? Like we sort of need everybody firing on all cylinders to make this work. There is so much untapped potential in like our own existing workforce, and we just haven't created the space to do it. So one of my hopes with things like Viz.ai is that we make it so easy to do the right thing in our day-to-day clinical workflows that you're now just freeing up all this cognitive headspace of providers to be like, what else can I do in the ecosystem? Hey, you know what? Because we got through our notes so fast in clinic, I'm going to spend an extra 30 minutes teaching because I like have time. I'm like not tired. Like I'm going to sit and teach some physical exam skills, which like we never do. My hope is AI both becomes like the enabler in the obvious way, but it's also freeing up human capacity so that people can bring their other talents to work.
I think of it sometimes as wanting to find what makes someone's heart sing and finding a way to bring that into their kind of their daily professional work.
Yeah, I love that. Exactly right.
Where can people go to learn more about you and more about what you're building at Viz.ai?
So Viz.ai's website is Viz.ai, so that's a great one to go to. And I'd preferentially push you towards a site called Viz Assist, which is the product I've been spending a ton of my time on to sort of get that chief resident full-time co-pilot with you. And then my personal website is surgeryredesign.com. That's where you'll find all the visual abstract stuff. And then I'm currently in the works on a book that I'll put on that website once my publisher tells me I'm allowed to, but it goes across medicine, architecture, and AI all in one book, trying to explain there are all these things happening all around us that we may not be appreciating or noticing, and try to sort of demystify that and get more people excited about the way we design our lives all the time.
Wow, I can't wait to read that. Andrew, thank you so much for joining me in the show today. This has been such a treat to get to talk to you.
Treat is mine. Yeah, David, you're a joy to hang out with and talk to. I always get a lot of joy out of it. So I'm honored to be involved.